different things. But it seemed it was much more structured and regimented, if you like, Did it make us any better? How did we come out of it better than our own kids? And that's always the test.
I didn't learn to critically think until probably I left university and went to work.
I thought you were
going
to say till I started coming on the panel.
Until she got a residency at Victoria.
Yeah, that's right. I better start.
I do want to ask you about this aspect of this report. One of the more chastening aspects really is student well-being. And we are, according to this report, the fifth worst country of those surveyed in terms of reported bullying among 15-year-olds, and we are also not flash in terms of truancy. Some 30% of students say they skipped a class in the 2 weeks prior to this test. Those are not good numbers, Mark.
No, and I was trying to, looking at that, I was trying to sort of think back, sort of what it was like, and there was always a few who would sort of skip school a lot. And the other thing with that whole study, because, and this is the thing that might become so complicated. On the face of it, our numbers have actually gone up until you dig down into the research and show, well, no, the gap is closed, but that's only because the top has actually fallen. We haven't actually got any higher. We've just got closer to the ones ahead of us because they've dropped down. This is the problem with all of this, and people read into things whatever they like. And we're looking at more reviews now over education. We'll go through this whole thing again, and the whole system will be thrown up again. And then in another 5 years can be told, well, no, that was completely wrong, and we've let down all these kids. We've sort of changed the system around. We want to end up as being, exactly as Catherine said, as critical thinkers. That education process helps us reach that point. And it's not necessarily going to be when we graduate from high school or even from university. It could take longer, but this is the sort of the building blocks.
Well, my concern is that, and I haven't had a look at the results of the test in detail, but a lot of these things, they measure outcomes, they measure things, but they never dig down into why things happen.
Yeah.
So if bullying is going up, why is that happening? Why are they asking?
And that's one of the issues with an international kind of test is that actually it's not that helpful to individual countries.
It is not helpful because cultural, contextual, environmental, social, etc. things go into it. So, factors influence it.
There's one other thing, which is my little sort of, hobby horse thing, is the first 1,000 days. There's been the research which says the first 1,000 days of a human being's life is what sets the template for the rest of it. And that's why, we had all this thing with paying teachers more, and quite agree. But early childhood education, that sector has such an influence on how our kids are going to be. And that longitudinal study in Dunedin has proved all that the things that happen in that first 1,000 days are critical to what happens to our development of our kids. So it could well be the stuff that we're talking about and looking at now, it's all too late in any case, because we missed that early opportunity to set these things in place.
Well, that could be. But that could be something that we should be looking at. And those are the tests that we should be looking at.
It's the first 1,000 days. There was a campaign that started. There's some fantastic couple, Chloe and Wayne Wright, who got into this. But the thing is, we dismiss that, don't we? And we've got to get started.
Very, very interesting stuff. Thank you very much indeed, Catherine Robertson, for coming on the panel today.
Thank you.
And good luck in your writer's residency. Mark Sainsbury, thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.
Great to be with you again, Amir, and congratulations again to Catherine.
Thank you, Mark.
Great stuff. And thank you to the listeners as well for your very interesting thoughts and observations. We will be back from 3:45 tomorrow. In the meantime, here's Checkpoint.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, a South Auckland clinic gives a 15-month-old Samoan boy antibiotics but refuses him a measles booster. The Prime Minister says it's outrageous the visiting toddler was turned away. The clinic responds live. We speak to the parents of the two babies who died after botched measles vaccinations in Samoa, a fatal error that's left many too scared to get their children immunised. The Pike River recovery team is just weeks away from breaking the mine's main seal and heading deep into uncharted territory. We hit one of the country's cannabis hotspots. What do they reckon about the referendum? And forget about green fingers, it's about the great avocado heist.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. There's at least 60 people dead in Samoa as the government prepares for door-to-door vaccinations tomorrow. 2 adults, a teenager and 2 very young children have died since yesterday. But the uncle of a 15-month-old child set to travel from Auckland to Samoa says he was shocked when a South Auckland clinic said it wouldn't immunise the boy on Monday. Mark Wendt, the uncle of Frederick Savainaya, says he was told the boy was ineligible, not being a New Zealander. Mr Wendt spoke to reporters in Samoa today, saying they are quarantining Frederick and hoping to get a visit from mobile clinics tomorrow. The Prime Minister says it's outrageous that the toddler was refused a measles vaccination. Jacinda Ardern says she'll be following up with the Health Minister David Clark to understand what happened.
I thought it was outrageous given this current situation. And I minded to ask questions about what happened there. But of course everyone would hear that and think that just makes no sense.
Jacinda Ardern also says she is horrified by the Otago Daily Times cartoon that made fun of Samoa's measles crisis. Dunedin's only Pasifika councillor is grateful the ODT has publicly apologised for running the cartoon. About 40 people gathered outside the newspaper's office this afternoon to protest about the cartoon and the cartoonist Garrick Tremaine. Editor Barry Stewart told the protesters he was deeply sorry and embarrassed the cartoon ran. He told them Mr Tremaine's work will not feature in the paper while his future is reviewed. Dunedin City Councillor Marie Laufiso says she hopes Mr Stewart undergoes sensitivity training and learns from this.
I am grateful for the apology. I'm just ineffably sad, especially for the children and the families, some of whom have relations here in Dunedin.
Marie Laufiso. Former senior New Zealand First officials want to share their concerns with the Justice Select Committee about how the party has previously handled donations. MPs will consider a request tomorrow from a former president and treasurer over how the party has handled donations in the past. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
Parliament's Justice Select Committee is continuing its inquiry into the 2017 general election, which is also looking at the influence of overseas actors and cash from other countries. Nationals used this morning's debate on a bill to ban most foreign political donations to highlight questions around New Zealand First and the party's foundation and its handling of donations. And those questions circling New Zealand First won't disappear anytime soon, with former officials Lester Gray and Colin Forster saying the Select Committee inquiry would be a safe place to speak out. From Parliament, Cor Charlie Drever, DNA.
The driver of a truck that hit a camper van killing the 2 Spanish tourists inside says he wishes he could bring back the innocent couple. A second inquest into the deaths of Juan Romacera and Eva Fahula Rovira were killed in Northland in December 2009, opened at the Auckland District Council, or Auckland District Court this morning. The couple, both 34 years old, were on their way to the Bay of Islands when a truck and trailer unit smashed into them just north of Whangarei. The driver of the truck, Ioane Etuale, asked the Solicitor General in 2016 to open a second inquest on the grounds he was not at the first. Mr Etuale said today he wished he was dead.
Forgive me. I'm so sorry. They are innocent. I should die. I should give my life to them.
Ioane Etuale. The New Zealand Jewish Council says an incident where a rugby player was called a Jew on television is part of an increase in anti-semitism in the country. In a June broadcast on Sky Sports, rugby player Bryn Hall called All Black Jack Goodhue a Jew for being unwilling to pay for his own wedding. On Tuesday, the broadcasting watchdog didn't uphold a complaint against Sky Sports, but said the comments were casual anti-Semitism. Jewish Council spokesperson Juliet Moses says the decision sends the wrong message and will normalise anti-Semitism.
So I think it is certainly more generally a part of an increase that we're seeing in anti-Semitism and racism around the world.
Juliet Moses. A Hawke's Bay avocado grower is urging fruit vendors to carefully check the origin of their fruit after 50 of his trees were completely stripped by thieves. Hamish Jardine, who owns Crab Farm Winery in Apia, says a huge hole was cut in his fence, allowing them to make off with some 2 tonnes of fruit. He says the loss is particularly disappointing because it had been such a bumper crop, and he wants avocado sellers and buyers to ask questions if they come across cheap produce.
You know, some people probably don't ask questions. They just sort of see a quick way of making money. We're going to have to start gating and possibly put up some cameras.
Hamish Jardine. It's just after 5:05. After snapping a 5-game losing streak in the last round of the Australian NBL, the New Zealand Breakers' next challenge is winning on the road. The Breakers have yet to win an away game after 5 attempts this season. The Auckland Basketball Club is the only team in the NBL to not have won away from their home court. Breakers captain Tom Abercrombie hopes they can remedy that when they play the Cairns Taipans on Friday.
I mean, nice to get that monkey off our back, and it's just about taking that momentum in from last week and making sure that we lock down defensive end. When you're a little bit short-handed and you're playing on the road, making sure you're great defensively first and foremost. Hopefully the shots will drop as well and we'll be able to get a win.
Tom Abercrombie. The New Zealand cricket team have been dominant in Test match series at home, but Captain Kane Williamson is aware the upcoming Test matches in Australia will pose different challenges. The Black Caps face a quick turnaround between Test series, with the first Test against Australia on December 12th in Perth. The first Test of the 3-Test series is a day-night match.
We know it's tough. We've been there before, and a lot of the guys have before, and it is tough cricket, and they're very strong in any conditions, but certainly very clinical in their own.
Kane Williamson. On day 2 of the 49er FX and NACRA 17 World Championships in Auckland, the New Zealand 49er FX sailors Alex Maloney and Molly Meach are sitting in 4th place overall after 4 qualifying races. That's the news.
Haze surrounding cannabis laws starts to lift.
So that 14 grams a day is approximately a grapefruit.
14 grams allowed per day. Now, nobody's going to smoke that much, so...
Correct.
What are they going to do with it? Pass it on to their grandchildren?
They've said anything from 21 to 42 joints. I don't have any personal experience of that, so I'm not going to be drawn on it.
This is all about money, and at the moment it's gangs in a black market making hundreds of millions, possibly billions from drugs, and now that may become corporates.
It's just crazy. Why would you add to the problems we've already got? We're struggling already with rampant drug use. It's just madness.
Roll up to Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, the Addiction Practitioners Association warns of a chronic workforce shortage as meth addictions rise and waiting times for treatment stretch out from 2 to 6 months. And after 10, biomechanics professor Tor Bezier on how sensors are revolutionising daily life and human bodies. Join me, Lynn Freeman, in for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, a few showers, especially in the north and east, possibly heavy. Auckland to Manawatu, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Central High Country and Wairarapa. Fine weather, however, isolated showers developing overnight or tomorrow morning. Horowhenua to Wellington, a few showers developing this evening, then clearing by tomorrow evening. Norwesterly gales in Wellington easing overnight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers, mostly in the west, clearing tomorrow morning. Norwesterly gales in exposed places, severe about the Canterbury High Country, easing tonight. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain tonight, possibly thundery. Showers tomorrow with squally thunderstorms in Fiordland. Otago and Southland, norwesterly gales in exposed places, and heavy rain with thunderstorms near the Divide, all easing tonight. Elsewhere, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Chatham Islands, mainly fine weather. RNZ National, it's coming up to 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna, and this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. The family of a 15-month-old Samoan boy denied a measles booster by a South Auckland medical clinic on Monday say their son was given antibiotics for a scab on his face but denied a vaccine because he was not a New Zealand citizen. 15-month-old Frederick Sava'inaya received his first vaccine 3 months ago, but during a visit to New Zealand for a family celebration, the measles epidemic in Samoa worsened and his family wanted him to have his booster shot before he flew home. Fred's parents returned home earlier with his older siblings, leaving him with his aunt and uncle, Mark and Darlene Went, who took him to the clinic in South Auckland on Monday because they were concerned a scab on his face might be infected. He was prescribed antibiotics but denied a vaccine because he wasn't a New Zealand citizen. Our reporters Logan Church and Alex Perrottet caught up with little Fred, his dad Peter and uncle Mark Went in Apia this afternoon.
We tried to weigh out our options. Obviously, we're on leave and everything is signed, and you got to come back. You can't sort of go. But we managed to come to an agreement that we would try and get him to get his injection in New Zealand, and that's when we visited the family doctors.
And what was your experience there? Tell me what happened.
Look, they were very pleasant. The lady who was there said, we had explained our situation, had the records. She said that she was unsure, but she would go and check. She went and came back and said that she wasn't able to do it because of the regulations in New Zealand and because he wasn't immunized initially in New Zealand, that they couldn't help us because of his status as well, not being a New Zealand citizen.
What was your reaction to that?
Shocked. I was a little bit taken back because it's kind of contradicting that you have, you're in a country that's offering a lot of support to Samoa by way of medical help and all that, and you've got a citizen of Samoa who's wanting some form of assistance. And
it's quite ironic that New Zealand is sending 100,000 vaccines from New Zealand to Samoa, yet they couldn't spare one in Auckland for a Samoan there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like I said before, it's great to get all the aid and the assistance we can from foreign countries, and we appreciate that. The fact that the irony in it is, Frederick is Samoan citizen, was in New Zealand, visiting New Zealand, and we were aware of the situation here in Samoa. Rather than coming back and piling up at the hospital or any of these centers that are doing the vaccinations, why don't we just get it done in New Zealand? And if it's at a cost, so be it.
So you had to come without the vaccination. You obviously have gone to great lengths to ensure Frederick's safety. Can you talk me through what some measures you have taken to make sure that he's safe back here?
Yeah. We arrived. He was obviously, he had a face mask on. We're kind of all with with all the hand, cleaning and all that stuff, just to make sure. We actually got him when we arrived to, Peter was obviously waiting at the airport. The car had been cleaned up, just to make sure because of any other people who might have been in the vehicle, and brought him out into the vehicle, and we sort of beelined and came straight out and came home. And this is where he's been ever since.
And what's the plan now? You're going to keep him here until things get better?
Yeah, the initial plan was when we got here, we'd talk to Peter and Kerry, see if we can get a private doctor to come out here and give him the vaccination. Because of all the jurisdictions that are imposed here in Samoa with the state of emergency, we wanted to discuss that before we went to that particular option. But this morning we were kind of made aware that, the vaccinations are actually coming to the homes now, and that Thursday and Friday is now kind of, everything is closed and everybody has to remain at home for these vaccinations to be done in order for everybody to be done. So of this household, he's the only one that's left, and so he'll have to wait here until they arrive.
Baby Fred's uncle and godfather Mark Went speaking to Logan Church this afternoon, and Mark told Logan the visit to the clinic for antibiotics but not a jab cost $60. Our deputy political editor Craig McCulloch asked the Prime Minister this afternoon if it's acceptable a clinic here in New Zealand denied Fred his MMR booster shot on Monday.
No, I heard this last night. I thought it was outrageous given this current situation, and I minded to ask questions about what happened there. But of course, everyone would hear that and think that just makes no sense.
How horrifying is it when you hear things like that, and what action will you take?
Oh, well, I was horrified as well by the cartoon I saw yesterday in the ODT. around the issue of the horrific measles outbreak. This is affecting children and babies. It's absolutely horrific. No one takes it lightly. New Zealand's doing all we can to assist. The fact that we didn't assist one child in New Zealand when we are giving vaccination to Samoa to vaccinate feels nonsensical to me. So it is something I will follow up with the Minister of Health. Oh, absolutely.
Dr. Alan Moffat is the Clinical Director of ProCare, the primary health organisation that oversees the clinic that denied Fred his measles booster, and he joins me now. Good evening, Dr. Moffat. You heard what the Prime Minister had to say there. What do you make of this?
Oh, look, firstly, I want to apologise that Fred didn't get vaccinated before leaving the country. You know, that should have happened. Unfortunately, in this situation, I think it's rather exceptional that they were not advised correctly. Immunisation schedule has always been eligible for non-residents and immigrants and so forth because of the need to actually ensure safety of New Zealanders and others. And it is ridiculous that somebody, you know, going to a high risk area wasn't vaccinated before they left. I think in this case we are doing a full investigation, but I've only managed an initial inquiry with the practice concerned, and it was really just a case of they were unsure about eligibility. Clearly, they also checked on the NIR, which wouldn't have included details for that baby, and so that sort of confused them somewhat.
So, Dr. Moffat, sorry to interrupt. Before you move on from that point, so you've had a conversation with the clinic, and what's the initial feeling, that they were confused about what the eligibility criteria is?
Yeah, they understood because the person wasn't eligible for normal health services that they didn't qualify for an immunisation. But in fact, the immunisation schedule's always been clear about this, that non-New Zealanders qualify for the immunisation schedule and for free vaccination. So that they were given, they gave the dad the wrong advice.
So the clinic got it wrong?
Yep, very clearly. And so we've taken the course of bringing all our clinics this afternoon to make sure that everybody is aware of the fact that they should definitely not be turning away people that are travelling to high-risk areas to be vaccinated.
Is there any evidence or suggestion that this clinic or any of the clinics under your PHO have turned others away for measles vaccinations?
I'm not aware of any other cases, but of course, and in this case, the person was already there anyway and should have been vaccinated. But often, if the person's not registered with the clinic, there can be difficulty getting an appointment just because of the pressure on clinics. But like I say, for this situation, it's actually an emergency, really. If somebody's travelling to Samoa and they're not vaccinated and they're aged under 50, they should get vaccinated.
But given the clinic was under the misinformation that they shouldn't be vaccinating non-New Zealand citizens, I'm assuming you can't rule out that they haven't turned other people away.
No, and I can't. I mean, my initial discussion with one of the staff members suggested that that's not the case, but in that there was only the one query that she could recall. But I have to say that that's why we are going out to all our clinics to make sure that everybody is aware that anybody presenting with a need for a vaccination should be vaccinated.
So the other thing that the family has told us, apart from being told that because Fred wasn't a New Zealand citizen, he didn't qualify, the other thing that was raised with them was because Fred had had an MMR vaccination, his first shot overseas, that they wouldn't give him the second shot here. So
no, that's not the case.
So again, misinformation.
Yes, indeed. I think in this case, they were let down. He should have been vaccinated before he left the country.
Are you confident they're clear on eligibility now at this specific clinic?
Yes, absolutely. And the Ministry have also sent out an advisory to all practices this afternoon that clarifies eligibility, just to be really clear. And so clinics should be aware of the priority groups already, that we've been sending out regular communication around that. What I don't have is the detail, because we haven't finished our investigation yet, but I don't have the detail around whether the person concerned was an authorised vaccinator or not. But if they were, they should have been aware of all of those rules.
Okay, so there's a possibility it might have been someone who was not medically trained who first encountered the family. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. We understood that the nurse at the clinic was away last week, and I'm not sure when this actually occurred. We know that there was a telephone call today, but I'm not sure when Fred attended the clinic.
Okay, so the email that you received from the ministry, in general terms, what does it address?
Oh, it basically makes it really clear that all non-residents and immigrants and other people that normally have to be here for 2 years before they qualify for vaccination, any child or person aged under 18 who requires vaccination can be vaccinated under the New Zealand immunisation schedule, and they can claim a fee for that, so the person should not be charged. If you're an adult over the age of 18, and obviously in the case of measles under the age of 50, then those people would have to pay for their vaccine, but they can certainly still be immunised.
Before you go, Dr. Moffat, I want to give you the opportunity to speak directly to this family. What would you like to say to them?
I really want to apologise that, it was really unfortunate that they weren't given the vaccine before they left the country. That is what should have happened.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. That is Dr. Alan Moffat, who is the Clinical Director of ProCare, and that's the organisation that oversees the clinic that denied that little boy Fred his measles vaccination. And as he mentioned there, last night on Checkpoint, our Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, said he would follow up on Fred's case. And as a result of that, the Health Ministry emailed today district health boards, public health units, GPs and others to remind them that all under 18-year-olds are eligible for an MMR vaccination regardless of their immigration status. In terms of vaccine availability, the Ministry says there are 85,000 doses of MMR and they arrived last week. A further 700,000 will arrive in January, and they are confident that there is enough to vaccinate all priority groups, and that includes all children, regardless of what passport they hold. And just before we move on, I've been handed some breaking news here. A fire has broken out in an industrial area in South Auckland suburb of Takanini. Fire and Emergency says 20 trucks are on their way to a warehouse in Inlet Road. We will bring you any updates that come to hand during the course of the show. We should also say on the subject of measles, we did ask the Health Minister David Clark on the program this evening, but he has denied our invitation. Meanwhile, 5 more babies passed away overnight, bringing Samoa's death toll from the measles epidemic to 60. And whilst the country's immunisation rates have been high, have never been high, a reluctance to get vaccinated has been blamed on an incident last year when 2 babies died after they were administered botched MMR vaccines. 2 nurses pleaded guilty to negligence causing manslaughter after 1 mixed vaccine powder with expired muscle relaxant anaesthetic instead of water. The concoction stopped the babies' hearts within minutes. Both nurses were jailed this year for 5 years. The 2 sets of parents are now suing the Ministry of Health. One family is demanding 10 million tala in compensation. That's just under 6 million New Zealand dollars. Today they spoke to Alex Perrottet and Logan Church through translators about their loss and their fight for justice.
Marietta and Samuelu Tuesuesue from Sasina village on Savaii couldn't have kids. They prayed and fasted for 7 years, and then suddenly they were blessed with little Lana Kalista, a special treasure of a child. They took the 1-year-old for her routine MMR vaccination in July last year when it all went horribly wrong.
They walked away from the hospital, waiting for the pass to go home. But suddenly she saw the daughter. There's a change, having that change. Started to stare and, had fits. So that's why she rushed back to the hospital and told the nurse what's happened to my daughter, and still doing that. She was trying to shake her, but there's no response. Yes, and she died.
Samuelu, I want to ask you a question about how you felt afterwards and what you did and what your life was like in the days and weeks following.
When he heard that sad news, she wanted to die at the same time with the daughter. And also he has that feeling, wanting to commit suicide.
You've prayed for so long for this baby. How did you feel that day when you realised that nothing more could be done?
So painful to have that feeling. All the positive feelings that are all gone.
As soon as Lana Kalista died, couples lining up became scared. Puni Puao and Siu Timua from Safotu got up to leave. They had the youngest of their 6 boys with them, healthy Lameko Opasiu. But they say their 1-year-old was immunised against their wishes.
Immediately after the first baby died, the nurse came and told me that I'm the next, my son is the next, but I totally refused. And but I told the nurse that no, that I've seen the other baby die, but the nurse came up with an excuse and said that no, it's okay, that other first baby was a sick baby. She wanted to take her baby home.
And then what happened? What happened next?
The baby was shaking and turned yellowish, even the eyes, the whole face. But it wasn't long. It wasn't for long.
And then what did you do?
So she ran back. She screamed and ran back to inside the hospital, and they tried to bring him back, but he was gone.
What do you think the Ministry of Health should have done?
He feels that the Ministry of Health should be accountable for what happened to the children. Their children were quite healthy, very healthy, and he held the Ministry of Health responsible for what happened.
You are taking on a big claim against the most powerful organisation in the country. Are you afraid about being on the wrong side of the government? Are you afraid at all, or are you worried about how they will react?
They're not afraid. It's just that they're taking this big leap of faith so that they might be able to find peace within themselves.
Puni Puao has since had a stroke. She can't move her right arm and leg and her left eye. The couples are suing not for the money, which they say will never replace their children. They just want justice and accountability. And like so many other Samoans, they blame the current crisis on the Health Ministry's prolonged suspension of vaccinations. They are not well off, but lawyers and others are rallying behind them to help. And once this crisis is over, there may be many, many more families filing similar actions in court. But despite everything that happened to them and their babies, they have taken the brave decision to send this message to the country ahead of tomorrow's mass door-to-door vaccination drive. What do you tell other parents in the country today who are still afraid of taking their children to get immunised, justifiably afraid because of what happened to your child? What is your message to them?
They really want to encourage parents because of this crisis, to take the babies, take their children to continue their immunization for the measles, because the problem was the fault of the nurses.
And that was the two sets of parents of two babies who passed away last July in Samoa after their babies were given botched MMR vaccines. And we'll hear more from Alex and Logan in Samoa after 6 o'clock tonight as the country prepares for a total shutdown tomorrow. It is almost 29 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're keen for your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme so far this evening. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. New information released to RNZ reveals that Shane Jones's office was sent documents about a forestry company's bid for $15 million from the Provincial Growth Fund multiple times and many months before he declared a conflict of interest because of links between the company and the New Zealand First Party. In fact, it has now emerged that Mr Jones only declared a conflict of interest over the New Zealand Future Forest Products bid on the day Radio New Zealand lodged an official information request asking for details of his involvement. That request was made by Guyon Espiner and he joins us now. Evening, Guyon. So this comes down to who knew what and when. So what can you tell us about what Shane Jones knew and when he knew it?
Yeah, just to back up a little bit first, Shane Jones has said he declared a conflict of interest over this bid for funding on October the 14th, that he did so because of his relationship with Brian Henry. Brian Henry, of course, the lawyer for Winston Peters and also the judicial officer for New Zealand First, so a powerful figure in the New Zealand First Party, also a director of this company, Future Forest Products, and so is Jan Trotman, who is the partner of Winston Peters. So those are the close links that we talk about with New Zealand First. This new information that we've got is based on parliamentary written questions that were lodged by the National MP, Chris Bishop. He's been asking Shane Jones about this. It shows that Shane Jones received official documents on this bid for public money 5 times over 4 months between June and October. Some of these documents appear to be quite substantial. For example, back in July, he was sent advice from the Provincial Growth Fund's independent advisory panel about the proposal, and all 5 times sent information about this bid until he declared this conflict of interests on the 14th of October. That's the same date that RNZ lodged the OAA asking about his involvement in the case.
Curious. So the information that went to Shane Jones, do we know how explicit it was? So New Zealand Future Forest Products, did it contain details of who was behind this company?
He says not. So we've gone to Shane Jones because there's a lot of questions for him to answer. Firstly, on the date of this, he says purely coincidence. It's a pure coincidence. His office says that he declared his conflict of interest on the day that RNZ lodged the information request asking what he knew about it. He says that is coincidence. We can only take his word for that. We can just lay out the sequence. So Future Forest Products is set up on March the 27th. By April the 8th, so only a few days after that, they've already got a bid in to the Provincial Growth Fund asking for this $15 million loan. Mr Jones has sent information about this thing 5 times. RNZ lodges its OAA on the 14th of October, the same day he declares to the Prime Minister that he has a conflict of interest. You ask about the documents. I mean, Shane Jones says none of these documents he received went into detail about the bid. He says none of them disclose that Brian Henry was behind the bid. He says the company's name wouldn't have meant anything to him because he didn't know who the identities behind the bid were. So he's sticking to his claim that he was only formally advised on October the 14th about this bid going to the Provincial Growth Fund. National's saying, look, it's hard to believe that given the information. I talked to Chris Bishop today. He said, quote, if he didn't know, he should have known because the documentation shows his office received 5 separate documents. He says that Shane Jones should have got out of this a lot earlier than he has. In response, Shane Jones says, look, he's handled it appropriately and that the bid was turned down. The $15 million bid was turned down anyway.
Okay, so a couple of things. I just want to go back to that timeline you presented. This was a pretty substantial request for funding. So remind me again, when it goes in between the company being formed and when they ask for the money?
It's only just about a week after. That company is established. If you go to the company's office website, you can see this documentation. It's all public there for anyone to check it out. It's only set up on March the 27th. By April 8, there's already a bid in with the Provincial Growth Fund. So that is is pretty...
For $15 million.
$15 million is what they wanted. They wanted a loan from the Provincial Growth Fund. Then by June, right through to October, Mr Jones is getting advice on this. Now, he's saying he didn't personally receive all these. 5 times documentation was sent to his office. We know that from this documentation that's been released today. He says that none of those documents outlined that Brian Henry or David Henry, who's his son, who's also involved, were involved in that, and he simply didn't know that those people were behind the bid.
So, to be clear, Mr Jones, a member of New Zealand First and a minister, says he was utterly oblivious to the fact that people with very strong ties to New Zealand First were behind this company that made this bid.
Yeah, that is absolutely right, and he's sticking to the idea that October 14, which is the date he declares the conflict of interest, that was the first time he was formally advised, and he's sticking to those words. He's done it in Parliament, and he's also saying it's coincidental that was the same day that RNZ began asking questions about this case. But I have to say, just finally, there are more documents to be released about this, and I suspect more questions to be answered by Shane Jones.
Thanks, Guy, and we look forward to further updates. That's RNZ investigative reporter Guyon Espiner. And if you want to look at his story in more depth, go onto our website and look for the in-depth section there. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, WorkSafe gives the go-ahead for the next phase of re-entry to the Pike River mine. How much is too much? Debate in Parliament and on the streets over the government's proposed cannabis legislation. And the great Avo heist, thieves take off with at least 50 trees worth of a bumper crop in Hawke's Bay. Love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Sorry, we're a little late to the headlines today, but Susanna is patiently waiting.
At least 60 people, mostly children, are dead in Samoa's measles epidemic. 2 adults, a teenager and 2 very young children have died since yesterday. The government is preparing for door-to-door vaccinations tomorrow. And the Prime Minister says it's outrageous Auckland doctors refused a vaccination for a 15-month-old because he didn't have a New Zealand passport. Jacinda Ardern says she'll be following up with the Health Minister, David Clark, to understand how that decision happened. Dunedin's only Pasifika councillor is grateful the ODT has publicly apologised for running a cartoon making light of Samoa's measles outbreak. About 40 people gathered outside the newspaper's office this afternoon to protest about the cartoon and the cartoonist Garrick Tremaine. Editor Barry Stewart told the protesters he was deeply sorry and embarrassed the cartoon ran. He told protesters the cartoonist's work will not feature in the paper while his future with the paper is reviewed. Former senior New Zealand First officials want to share their concerns with the Justice Select Committee about how the party has previously handled donations. MPs will consider a request tomorrow from a former president and treasurer over how the party has handled donations in the past. The Select Committee is continuing its inquiry into the 2017 general election, which is also looking at the influence of overseas actors and cash from other countries. A fire has broken out in an industrial area in South Auckland, in the suburb of Takanini. Fire and Emergency says 20 trucks are on their way to a warehouse in Inlet Road. All businesses in the immediate vicinity have been evacuated safely. Wallabies rugby great Israel Folau has reached a confidential settlement with Rugby Australia, whose officials have apologised to him over his sacking. Rugby Australia terminated Folau's contract in May after he posted to social media that homosexuals, among others, would go to hell. Folau then took legal action demanding $14 million in compensation and an apology for wrongful dismissal. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen, and it's time for business news now with Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona. Law being changed to make insurance companies improve their customer contracts. How so?
Well, it's consultation that's been going on for a while, and I guess about a year. The government has sort of been saying, look, we're going to have another look at the way these contracts are done, because there's been a lot of complaints. The insurance industry is one of the industries that have come under greater scrutiny with what's been happening across the Tasman, for example. And so among the things that are going to be looked at are the way that contracts are drafted, so that instead of consumers having to disclose everything they think might be relevant, insurance companies are going to have to ask specific questions about what kind of disclosure they're expecting. So they can't later on say, well, you didn't mention that. Well, if you didn't ask, why would you mention it? It's not going to be on the consumers to come up with things that they should be disclosing. It's going to be the other.
So the onus is
yes, that's going to shift. Company. And it means that also unfair contract arrangements, which consumers would potentially sign. Insurance companies won't be able to put unfair clauses into their insurance contracts and that sort of thing. Now, how it's going to be drafted is not quite there yet. The insurance industry is going to work with the government to make sure that their interests are also represented. But they acknowledge that it's time for a change, and it's going to be a refresh all around.
Let's turn to credit unions now. They're concerned about the effect of changing regulation on their businesses. What are they worried about?
Well, it's not just them that are worried. It's actually this organisation called the Council of Financial Regulators, which they're the ones who flagged the concern about the credit union sector. And this includes the Reserve Bank, the Financial Markets Authority, Ministry of Business Innovation and Employment, Commerce Commission, and Treasury. And they decided that one of the things they need to look at is the sustainability and health of the credit union sector. So some of the concerns are, how well is the sector performing? Recently, the Financial Markets Authority issued a report on auditors, and one of the sections raised some concerns about how credit unions are audited, for example. Is it sufficient? Now, some credit unions are quite small, like maybe only 1,000 members. Others are large. And I spoke to the chief executive of the biggest one, which is Credit Union Baywide, and he was saying that one of the big things that the credit unions are concerned about is the increasing regulation that's being applied to the financial sector, what we just talked about. And one of the things in particular would be the capital requirements, which the Reserve Bank is going to be announcing tomorrow. What's the Reserve Bank going to do imposing on the big banks? Will those rules also extend to the small credit unions? I mean, if you've got 1,000 members, you're not going to be able to come up with the goods that the Australian big banks are going to be able to come up with. So these are the kinds of issues that are going to be explored over the next little while. And yeah, credit unions want to survive, and they're saying that some of the small ones are, they do serve a purpose. For example, the firefighters union have a credit union, and they would like to keep it.
What numbers do you bring today, Nona?
Well, interesting ones, because Donald Trump tweeted that he might not be able to do the trade deal until after the 2020 election. So there you go. That put a shudder through the markets, I have to say. But maybe it would stop him talking for a year. Who knows? Anyway, the NZX Top 50 Index, it closed down 18 points to close at 11,210. And the New Zealand dollar is buying 65.1 US cents. It's still a little bit, on the high side there. 95.4 Australian. And you'll be pleased to know, Lisa, 50.1 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with all the numbers and business news. Now to the large fire that's broken out at a warehouse in an industrial area of South Auckland, sending plumes of black smoke across Takanini. 20 fire trucks are responding to the blaze, which started around 4:30 this afternoon. Fire and Emergency says the blaze broke out at a furniture removers and everyone was safely evacuated from the building. Nearby resident Ben Ross told reporter Amy Williams the acrid smoke stinks and his family have closed all the windows and doors to their home.
We could see thick, billowing black smoke, which is now currently over my house where I reside, so we're downwind, as well as if I go to the top of the road, we can see bright yellow flames coming from what was left of the building.
And are you concerned about that smoke getting into your house?
Concerned enough that I've sent all the family indoors and closed all the windows, given it's an industrial fire.
Yes. What does it smell like?
At the moment, it was smelling, and you could taste the acrylic metal smell. Pavica is having a debate between whether it was the Save Mart or the freight forwarding company next to it.
Ben Ross talking to reporter Amy Williams, and we'll have more on this story as it comes to hand. A bill cracking down on foreign political donations has passed its third reading in Parliament, with MPs using it as an opportunity to air the dirty laundry of other parties. The government introduced the legislation banning foreign donations over $50 after warnings overseas money was being used to influence politics in New Zealand. Foreign donations are also part of an ongoing inquiry into the 2017 general election, Parliament's Justice Committee. MPs on the committee will consider a request from 2 former senior New Zealand First officials who want to share their concerns about the party's past handling of donations. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
There's broad agreement the law needs to be changed, but the views on how to get there are diverse. National used this morning's debate on the bill to highlight questions around New Zealand First and the party's foundation and its handling of donations. MP Jerry Brownlee questioned why the government is introducing a bill for anonymous foreign donations rather than a much bigger issue.
In fact, we are ignoring the fact that there is a massive loophole here available and used so far by New Zealand First and available to others inappropriately to avoid the scrutiny of where the money comes from.
MP Nick Smith told Parliament foundations and societies should be included in the law change.
We should not put up with the farce of New Zealand First having a foundation that collected over $500,000 of secret donations. That they should be included in the ban. What is the point?
He also took another swipe at the Greens.
How is it possible that the Green Party has championed banning foreign donations for the last 5 years, but has got 50 times more foreign donations, according to the regulatory impact statement, than the other party? This sounds like preaching one thing and doing exactly the opposite.
But Minister of Justice Andrew Little didn't let Nationals' attacks go unanswered.
There is only one party in this Parliament that is currently the subject of a serious fraud office investigation. It happens to be the National Party. There is only one party who, in their returns in the 2017 general election, showed an extraordinary number of donations to candidates from their head office, and that is the National Party.
Andrew Little says there are already requirements on party officials to discourage the misuse of structures like foundations. He also hit back at criticism that the bill does not address the risk of foreign influence through funding political parties and candidates.
I've seen commentary from some pretty esteemed academics, actually, who say that. And I have to say this to the House, they are wrong. They are wrong.
Andrew Little says officials are doing more detailed work to look at how to close other loopholes. Those reforms will have to wait until after the election. But in the meantime, the donation allegations circling New Zealand First won't disappear anytime soon, with former party president Lester Gray and treasurer Colin Forster now looking to divulge what they know to the Justice Select Committee. They say there are personal and legal risks to speaking out, and the Select Committee inquiry would be a safe place to do it. MPs on the Select Committee will decide on this request tomorrow. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Court Charlie Drever, DNA.
It is about 13 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let us know what you think about that. Do the changes to the political donations regime go far enough? Should we ban foundations and trusts? Should we get rid of donations altogether? And should elections be funded by the taxpayer? Let us know your thoughts. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A recovery team could start exploring deep inside the entry tunnel to the Pike River mine by Christmas. That's after WorkSafe today signed off on the Pike River Recovery Agency's plan as they work to figure out what caused the explosion in 2010. The plan involves getting as far as 2.3 kilometres inside the tunnel in a search for the bodies of the 29 men who died. Conan Young reports.
The body of Sonia Rockhouse's son, Ben, is among those trapped somewhere inside the mine. She says the green light from WorkSafe has been a long time coming, but now that it's been given, the job of trying to bring Ben back can finally begin.
You know, it's very exciting. All of a sudden, it's just, they did tell us that once they got the go-ahead, because they're all just teething at the bit. They've all been waiting at the start line to go, and now they can, so they're off.
Pike River Recovery Agency Chief Operating Officer Dingy Pattinson says fresh air is now being pumped beyond a 170-metre seal in order to clear away the nitrogen inside.
Now that'll take a number of days to do. It'll take most of this week. Once we know we've got fresh air up here, we're going to monitor that and assess it for a week, for 7 days, so we can prove that the changes we've made to the environment underground has stabilised and it is safe to proceed.
Dingy Pattinson says at that point the 170-metre seal will be removed and a team will start moving down the tunnel, hopefully in about 3 weeks. They'll be searching for evidence and for bodies.
The police are taking an agile approach to whether they'll go underground or not, and until that decision is made, they have forensically trained our people up, so our people know how to gather the evidence. That'll be done under guidance from the police. The police will be on site the whole time we're in that mine.
Sonia Rockhouse feels vindicated by today's announcement after being told 3 years ago by then Prime Minister John Key that re-entering the mine would be unsafe and lunacy.
We had 5 or 6 experts saying the exact opposite, that it could be done and it could be done safely. They were listening to one man and they wouldn't meet with our experts and listen to what our experts had to say. And that was the frustrating part for us.
The minister responsible for Pike River re-entry, Andrew Little, says the best chance of finding evidence of what caused the explosion will be when the team reaches the area just before a huge rockfall, where electrical equipment is housed.
This is about gathering any evidence that we can get available to see whether any further action can be taken. Because in addition to everything else, clearly one of the things that the families have grappled with is the fact that no individual who was a decision maker responsible for Pike River has ever been held to account, and that's wrong.
The recovery team is expected to have completed its work by June. There's no plan at this stage to explore the main workings of the mine, where most, if not all, of the men are thought to be, and crucially, where the ignition source for the explosion is most likely located. Mō te hotaka o te ahi, ko Kananyang tēnei.
Nationals Deputy Paula Bennett has pulled a stunt at Parliament, brandishing a bag of lookalike cannabis to demonstrate how much a person could buy every day under the proposed legal regime. The government yesterday unveiled the rules which would govern a recreational cannabis market if the public gives it the go-ahead in next year's referendum. Among the restrictions is a purchase limit of 14 grams per day, roughly half an ounce. Mrs Bennett says that's way too much and took a 14-gram bag of oregano into Parliament to prove it.
Does she think it promotes the well-being of New Zealanders when under her government's legislation people will be able to purchase up to 14 grams a day of weed?
Speaker.
Order.
Mr Speaker, the member well knows in drafting a bill that all of New Zealand can determine whether they agree with, that we will have looked to international frameworks that already exist. I would say to the member that in Washington it is twice that. In Canada it is more than twice that, and in Colorado it's twice that. So if the member believes it should be less, I implore the member to come and engage with the bill, the group that is being brought together across this House to constructively engage on the issues. And if the member disagrees with that level, it is absolutely her prerogative to put that argument alongside other MPs as part of that cross-party working group.
Order. I am going to ask both the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and the Minister of Finance to chill out.
And that's the Speaker of the House, Trevor Mallard, ending that audio from Parliament. And one wonders why it was oregano, why not basil or parsley? Anyway, New Zealanders are set to decide whether or not to give the green light to legalising cannabis use next year. And Nelson is one of the country's cannabis growing hotspots and ranks third behind Northland and the North Island's east coast for the number of plants police seized last year. So we sent our regional reporter, Tracy Neal, to ask people on the street what they think.
Nelson City busker Mario Paraha's views are clear on whether or not cannabis should be legal, but he's not sure the government will be.
I myself personally would probably say yes, but looking from the government side of view, they're probably going to keep it on a stranglehold so they've got control of the people. People will say yes, they'll say no. It's a matter of control. And they have no control if they actually give control. In the same instance, there are guidelines behind cigarettes and alcohol and legalisation of all that sort of stuff.
Nelsonians seem fairly black and white on the subject, except on the amount that might become legal. The law would allow people to grow up to 2 plants each, or 4 per household, and buy up to 14 grams of dried cannabis a day. That's the equivalent of between 21 and 42 joints.
But you're virtually chain smoking this stuff if you're going to have 40.
Yeah, that's a lot, isn't it?
Someone's going to get very high having that much cannabis in their system.
I think that it sounds a bit excessive.
That sounds a very large amount. I'm not sure why it needs to be such a large minimum.
Retired insurance advisor Vern Marden doesn't want to see cannabis legalised.
I'm leading against it because I don't think cannabis is, as a drug, is right for our community. I know a lot of people disagree, but I still have very, very strong beliefs that we don't need it.
He's worried about the harm it can cause to mental health. Nelson lawyer Jock Sutherland is opposed to cannabis being legal because of the harm it can create in the workplace.
And if they're working with machinery or driving a car or turning up to the office, then their brain's not functioning the way it was designed to function. And there's a detrimental effect on that.
And it's a no from Ruth Urban also. She supports the use of medicinal cannabis, but has lived overseas in communities where it's legal and says it drives up living costs.
People move to a place where it's legal from areas where it's not, so rentals go up. We've got a bad enough housing situation already, and I think that'll put even more pressure on the low-income rentals here. I've seen it happen overseas.
Central City vape store manager Matt Robinson says he's not yet sure which way he'll vote. He wants a chance to research the details and talk about it with his family.
We've got young kids, we've also got an 18-year-old boy as well, so it'd be interesting to see what his views are, because obviously when I was 18 a wee while ago was quite a bit different than what he is in the current climate.
But it's a definite yes from Janaea Instone.
I don't believe it's as big a problem as it's been made out to be. I think that it'll be controlled, and I believe that there's no limit on alcohol consumption, so why should it be on cannabis consumption?
Cannabis forms one of 2 referendums attached to next year's general election. National says the proposal doesn't yet have the level of detail the public deserves, including that it doesn't go into what it means for drug driving, for police training, what the tax rate will be, or the levels of THC. In Nelson for Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
Principals and researchers agree that a declining love of reading and rising classroom disruption could be to blame for New Zealand's poor results in a major international test. Our 15-year-olds' scores in the OECD's Programme for International Student Assessment are now lower than they were a decade ago by a factor equivalent to nearly a year's education. Researchers say the long-term decline in reading, science and maths will take years to rectify. Here's our education correspondent John Gerritsen.
The results published overnight show New Zealand still ranks well against 79 other countries and regions at 11th equal in reading, 12th in science and a middling 27th for maths. But the problem worrying the Education Ministry is that a big drop in New Zealand's scores that happened in the 2012 round of testing is yet to be reversed. It says that could be because fewer teens enjoy reading and more are reporting noisy, unsettled classrooms and bullying from their peers. Deirdre Shea from the Secondary Principals Association says schools are certainly seeing more challenging students than in the past, but it's not because schools lack discipline. She says they're wrestling with the impact of wider problems.
You know, the things around well-being, around quality of life, around families being well enough resourced to be able to provide all the things that they want to. Those are well understood and will have negative impacts in terms of young people being able to concentrate in class, being ready to learn, and all those sorts of things.
Michael Johnston from Victoria University's School of Education says classroom disruption could be partly to blame for New Zealand's position, and he believes the teaching of reading in primary schools needs more attention.
I know that they're talking about the classroom environment and bullying and things like that. All of those things could be factors. I'd also want to have a look more deeply at the pedagogy itself. How are we teaching children to read, and is that working? I think there's some questions to be asked there.
Kathy Wiley from the Council for Educational Research says there are plenty of programs aimed at improving the teaching of maths, reading and science, but they need to be supported and applied more consistently across all schools.
The right things, they're there, but they're a bit piecemeal. It's not that we've actually got clarity, for example, about how to teach science well, and we're working systematically with science teachers across the country. So I think what we've still got is a lot of pocketed stuff, and until you start to join up the dots, I don't think you're going to get the substantial shift.
Kathy Wiley says that should happen as a result of the changes recommended by the Tomorrow Schools Review Task Force, which she was a member of. However, she says it will take a long time for PISA results to improve.
Substantial change will take a few years to come about, and it will need, ongoing concerted attention, and I don't really think we'll see much change in these PISA results. I don't know, for another 6 to 9 years.
In the meantime, New Zealanders can take some solace from the fact the latest fall in PISA scores is not considered statistically significant, and the results are better than Australia's. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
Well, the cannabis issue has got you all fired up. This one in from Karen, who says, why are we encouraging people to go back to inhaling smoke into their lungs when we know they'll get cancer and heart disease? We know this and have got on top of it with tobacco by vaping. Why not cannabis only by vaping? Another one says, never mind 4 grams of oregano, that would challenge Bob Marley in a day.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātawa tēnei. The family of a 15-month-old Samoan boy denied a measles booster by a South Auckland clinic says their son was given antibiotics but denied a vaccine because he is not a New Zealand citizen. 15-month-old Frederick Savainaya received his first vaccine 3 months ago, but during a visit here the epidemic in Samoa worsened and his family wanted him to have his booster shot before he flew home. His uncle Mark Wendt, who took the boy to the ProCare clinic, has told Checkpoint the refusal was a shock.
It's contradicting that you have, you're in a country that's offering a lot of support to Samoa by way of medical help and all that, and, you've got a citizen of Samoa who's wanting some form of assistance.
Mark Wendt. ProCare's clinical director Dr Alan Moffat has told Checkpoint the clinic got it wrong and has apologised. He says initial inquiries suggest it was confused about the rules.
They understood because the person wasn't eligible for normal health services that they didn't qualify for an immunisation. But in fact, the immunisation schedule's always been clear about this, that non-New Zealanders qualify for the immunisation schedule and for free vaccination, so that they gave the dad the wrong advice.
Dr Moffat says it's now clarified this with all its medical centres. Also today, the Health Ministry has emailed district health boards, public health units, GPs and others to remind them that all under 18 years old are eligible for an MMR vaccination, regardless of their immigration status. Firefighters are battling a big blaze in an industrial area of South Auckland. 20 fire trucks are responding to the blaze at a warehouse on Inlet Road in the suburb of Takanini, which began about 4:30. Fire and Emergency says the fire broke out at a furniture removers and all people were safely evacuated. Local resident Ben Ross says his wife was cleaning the car outside when she noticed thick, billowing black smoke.
We could see thick, billowing black smoke, which is now currently over my house where I reside, so we're downwind, as well as if I go to the top of the road, we can see bright yellow flames coming from what was left of the building.
Ben Ross says the smoke smells metallic and they closed all the windows and doors to their home. Shane Jones' office received official documents about a New Zealand first-linked forestry company's bid for public money 5 times before the minister declared a conflict of interest. NZ Future Forest Products, whose directors include Winston Peters' lawyer Brian Henry and Mr Peters' partner Jan Trotman, made an unsuccessful bid to borrow $15 million from the Provincial Growth Fund, for which Mr Jones is responsible. Gail Nespiner reports.
Shane Jones says he sought advice over a conflict of interests on October the 14th and later recused himself from any decisions about the future forest products bid. But answers to written parliamentary questions show his office was sent documents mentioning future forest products and its PGF application 5 times between June the 17th and October the 9th. A 6th document was sent after Mr Jones recused himself. Mr Jones says he only personally received 3 of the documents and none went into detail about the bid or disclosed Brian Henry's involvement. Ko Guyan Espina, TNA.
The driver of a truck that slammed into a camper van killing 2 tourists has accused the police of washing away evidence that would prove his innocence. A second inquest into the deaths of Juan Romacera and Eva Fahula Rovira who were killed in Northland in December 2009 opened this morning. The couple, both 34 years old, were on their way to the Bay of Islands when a Linfox truck and trailer unit smashed into them on State Highway 1 just north of Whangarei. An inquest in 2012 found driver error caused the crash. The driver of the truck, Ioane Etuale, said the police washed away oil that would prove the crash was because of a mechanical error.
New Zealand police, everybody swear for the truth, save the country, with truth and honesty and justice. This is all lies.
Ioane Etuale. The Queenstown Lakes District Council says it's a matter of when, not if, Wanaka's Main Street floods. The council is providing sandbags to concerned property owners as lake levels rise. Megan Miller of the council says the flooding is likely to peak on Friday, spilling over onto Ardmore Street. She says some businesses along the lakefront street could experience surface flooding.
Certainly that community has not seen this level of flooding for 2 decades. That is entirely confronting for people seeing that. These lakes flood by teacup. It's a slow creep, but it is a creep that's outside anyone's control. So in Wanaka, we've made sandbags available as a precaution.
Megan Miller says the lake will take a long time to drain to normal levels, and with more rain on the way, Ms Miller says the council could be monitoring the flood risk for days or even weeks. It's coming up to 5.5 minutes past 6. The former Australia Full Black Israel Folau has settled his unfair dismissal case with Rugby Australia and Super Rugby team the New South Wales Waratahs. Folau took legal action against Rugby Australia and the Waratahs when his 4-year contract was terminated in May after he posted a meme on social media saying homosexuals would go to hell. They have reached a confidential settlement. More than 400 international sailors are in Auckland for the week-long 49er FX and NACRA 17 World Championships. On day 2 of the event, the New Zealand Olympic 49er gold medalists Peter Burling and Blair Tuke are in first place after 5 qualifying races. Strong winds prevented any race in the 49er FX on day 1 of the championships, but the New Zealand sailors Alex Maloney and Molly Meach have been on the water today and sit in 4th place overall after 4 qualifying races. In the NACRA 17, New Zealand's top-placed crew is in 16th after 4 races. New Zealand has 19 boats competing across the 3 classes at the championships, hosted by the Royal Akrana Yacht Club. Australia boxing great Jeff Fennick has pledged his brain to science after research into the effects of concussion. Across his career, Fennick claimed world titles in 3 different boxing divisions. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Nick Tipping brings you the jazz of Karori. We'll have another crack at speaking to Yana Stewartz, the co-founder of the stereotype-busting Arab music label, Habibi Funk. There's another hump quiz to help you crest in the midweek, and Michael Belgrave explains why the digital age is also the golden age of history. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, a few showers, especially in the north and east, possibly heavy. Auckland to Manawatu, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Central High Country and Wairarapa. Fine, however, isolated showers developing overnight or tomorrow morning. Horowhenua to Wellington, a few showers developing this evening, then clearing by tomorrow evening. Norwesterly gales in Wellington easing overnight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine weather. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, a few showers mostly in the west, clearing clearing tomorrow morning. Norwesterly gales in exposed places, severe about Canterbury High Country, easing tonight. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland, periods of heavy rain today, possibly thundery showers tomorrow with squally thunderstorms in Fiordland. Otago and Southland, norwesterly gales in exposed places and heavy rain with thunderstorms near the Divide, all easing this evening. Elsewhere, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Chatham Islands, mainly fine. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8.5 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna, and thanks for joining us. This is Checkpoint. A primary health organisation has tonight apologised after one of its clinics denied a measles booster to a 15-month-old Samoan boy in South Auckland. Earlier in our programme, ProCare Clinical Director Dr Alan Moffat conceded staff at one of his clinics got it wrong when Frederick's Vainaya's family was told on Monday that the toddler couldn't have the booster because he got his first jab in Samoa and he wasn't a New Zealand citizen. The little boy is now back in Samoa waiting for his booster. It comes as the death toll in Samoa from the measles epidemic rose to 60 today, after 5 more babies died overnight. Tomorrow, the country will be shut down for 2 days, so mobile medical teams can visit people who haven't been vaccinated to immunise them at home. Our reporter Alex Perrottet joins us now live from Apia. Alex, what orders have been made regarding the shutdown?
Lisa, they're unprecedented. They're very strict. Almost every private business and everyone who's a private citizen must close, must go and stay at home. This is kind of like a 2-day public holiday, Thursday and Friday, so a 4-day weekend, except the first 2 days you can't go out, you've got to stay at home. As we talk, there's a few locals wandering around this park enjoying the last few hours before they have to be quarantined at home. Businesses shut, as I said, a few different exceptions there. So civil defence, fire and emergency, the water and electricity authorities, but you can't take the boat between the two islands. You can get to the airport if you can prove that you've got an air ticket out of the country for international travel, but most people will be staying at home. Cars are off the road, and only petrol stations that serve government cars will be allowed to operate.
So people staying at home, what have they been told to do?
Okay, so Lisa, this sounds like something a little bit out of the book of Exodus. Every single family must stay in their home tomorrow. They can't go outside. And if there is someone in their house who has not been vaccinated, they must take a red cloth or garment and go to the front fence or the front of their house or put it on a pole, but make it very, very visible that there is a red cloth outside their house which tells the mobile vaccination units that there is someone in there that's yet to be vaccinated. For example, the Savainaya family, who we heard about a little bit before with young Frederick, everyone else in their home has had the jab, adults and children. Frederick is yet to get his booster MMR shot. They will put a red flag outside their house and the mobile vaccination units, which are going out all over the country, will stop by.
So obviously that relies on people being honest about the situation in their household.
Absolutely. There is no other way. They say it's compulsory. Next month they're going to bring in a law, they're tabling it this month, that will ban children from enrolling in school in January if they can't prove that they've been immunised. But tomorrow they are just relying on everyone's goodwill to stay home, be honest and be receptive when those mobile units come with the needles.
So some people getting vaccinated may already be infected. So can you talk us through the numbers of those infected? Is it increasing still?
It's still increasing, Lisa, and almost around about the same rate. There were 171 new infections overnight. Today is the first day that those who got the jab at the beginning of the mass vaccination campaign will be immune, because it started exactly 2 weeks ago today. Those getting the jab tomorrow, they have to be very careful about what they do for the next 2 weeks. In the last 24 hours, there's been 5 more deaths, taking the death toll to 60. A little bit different this time round because there's 2 very young children under the age of 1. There's a teenager and then 2 adults that have died. So that death toll at 60. Keep in mind as well, there's still 20 critically ill children in hospital battling this, being watched by doctors, 3 pregnant women as well as 2 new mums, postnatal women undoubtedly with their newborn children as well.
Thanks, Alex. That is Alex Perrottet updating us from Apia there. And as Alex said, tomorrow is the start of the shutdown, and households in Samoa that have anyone inside who are unvaccinated are being told to hang a red garment at the fence or entrance to their property. Protesters gathered outside the Otago Daily Times in Dunedin today to show their anger at a cartoon which poked fun at the measles epidemic in Samoa. In response, the newspaper has announced it will not publish any work by cartoonist Garrick Tremaine until a review of his future at the publication is complete. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown was at the protest and filed this report.
Tremaine must go and Stewart too!
The group of 40 protesters were angry and their message clear. They want Garrick Tremaine and Otago Daily Times editor Barry Stewart to resign. Mr Stewart, visibly upset and his hands shaking, addressed the protesters.
The content of the cartoon was insensitive and I apologise without reservation for publishing it. I am personally embarrassed and I'm also deeply upset for my colleagues who have been tainted by this error in judgment.
The response drew jeers and scorn from some of the protesters.
What about the children? There are babies dying right now, and this is all you can say? We have someone's families right in front of you right now, and that's all you can say? You care about your colleagues more than these fucking babies dying right now?
The cartoon in question depicts two women outside a travel agent, and its caption jokes the least popular spots at the moment are the ones people are picking up in Samoa. Barry Stewart has accepted full responsibility for it being published and says a review of Mr Tremaine's future at the Otago Daily Times is underway.
Our senior editorial team and management met this morning and we have made a decision no longer to run cartoons by Garrick Tremaine while we are working through a review process.
Mr Stewart says that review process will be quick.
I am fully aware these words do not go far enough to heal the hurt that we have caused, but I hope it does go some way to show how sorry we are. I would like to take this opportunity to apologise directly to our Samoan community who are deeply affected in dealing with this dreadful human tragedy.
Mr Stewart, who stood side by side with Allied Press's chief executive, Grant McKenzie, was booed as he walked away. Dunedin City Councillor Marie Laufiso joined the protest and says she hopes Mr Stewart undergoes sensitivity training and learns from this.
I am grateful for the apology. I'm just ineffably sad, especially for the children and the families, some of whom have relations here in Dunedin.
The cartoon has also attracted anger from Otago Daily Times staff, some of who expressed their disappointment online. Race Relations Commissioner Meng Foon also expressed his outrage. Protest organiser Sinna Brown-Davis says today's action is only the beginning of the group's movement.
How dare this cartoonist make a mockery of the loss of Samoan lives? Samoan lives matter, Samoan lives are important. How dare he trample on the graves of babies and children?
Garrick Tremaine yesterday remained unrepentant about the cartoon, describing it as an innocuous joke.
Had I thought it wasn't advisable or satisfactory, I wouldn't have done it. So I think the answers to that. I can later regret having done it, but at the time, obviously, that did not occur to me. I thought it was an innocuous joke. It doesn't mention anything about deaths or children or these things that everybody else seems to be so concerned about.
He has since backtracked and issued a public apology on his website. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
It's 17 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The driver of a truck that slammed into a camper van, killing 2 tourists a decade ago, has accused the police of washing away evidence that would prove a mechanical fault caused the crash. A second inquest into the deaths of Juan Roma Serra and Eva Fahula Rovera opened at the Auckland District Court this morning. The couple, both 34 years old, were on their way to the Bay of Islands when a Linfox truck and trailer unit smashed into them on State Highway 1 just north of Whangarei. Today, for the first time, the driver of that truck shared his side of the story. Katie Scotcher reports.
This morning, lawyers, police officers and witnesses to the fatal crash almost a decade ago filed into a small courtroom. They did the same in 2012 when Juan Romaceda and Eva Fahula Rovera's deaths were first investigated by Coroner Shortland. Notably, the driver of the truck that crashed into their camper van was not at that inquest, despite a summons and numerous attempts by the police to find him. Coroner Shortland later found driver error caused the crash. In 2016, the truck driver Ione Etuale asked the Solicitor General to open a second inquest on the grounds he was not at the first to provide evidence. Today, he told the coroner the crash was the result of a power steering failure, not driver error.
I was on a straight piece of road, and all of a sudden, the steering wheel in a truck started shaking. It was shaking for a few seconds, and then I heard something snap. It was quite loud.
Coroner Peter Ryan said after the crash, investigators found no evidence of a mechanical failure.
But my impression from reading those reports is that the inspectors could not find an obvious snap or fracture in the steering mechanism. Do you accept that or do you not?
No.
You don't accept that?
No.
Mr Etuale said oil on the road after the crash clearly showed there was a mechanical fault. He told the inquest there were witnesses who he has tried to track down who saw oil on the road too. But Coroner Ryan said photos of the crash don't appear to back up that claim. Mr Etuale told the inquest the police and the fire brigade washed away the oil before the pictures were taken. He said they did this as they wanted to cover up the fact they'd ignored previous warnings about the quality of the road.
New Zealand police, everybody swear for the truth, save the country, with truth and honesty and justice. This is all lies.
Coroner Ryan questioned the likelihood of this, as debris from the crash had not been cleared at the time the pictures were taken, which would make it difficult to clean the road. But Mr Etuale was adamant the police washed away the evidence. He earlier told the inquest he wished he was dead.
I wish I die. I wish I die and can give my life to these innocent people. Forgive me. I'm so sorry. They are innocent. I should die. I should give my life to them.
Mr Etuale said he wants justice for the Spanish tourists.
I'm speaking because there are 2 lives lost. And I carry that every single minute, every single second with me.
The inquest is set down for 3 days and will resume at the Auckland District Court tomorrow morning. I tamaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Katie Scott Churaho.
A Hawke's Bay avocado grower is in disbelief after 50 trees were completely stripped of their fruit. It comes as the Avocado Association is warning growers to keep a closer watch over their crops following a spate of thefts around the country. Hamish Jardine, who is the owner and winemaker of Crab Farm Winery in Napier, says the theft on his Bayview orchard is particularly gutting because it had been a bumper crop. He told our reporter Anusha Bradley each tree was carrying around 40 kilos of fruit, but it wasn't until Sunday evening that he noticed it was all gone.
We saw the fence cut and sort of branches broken and stood to reason as to what had happened. Someone had just come in and cleaned us up.
So what did you think when you realised that they'd been stolen?
Well, just disappointed, you know, like you sort of, like anything that you lose, you're sad and angry, and then you know that you have to make measures really to sort of strengthen up your security and work out a few ways of so it doesn't happen next time. I mean, we're going to have to start gating and possibly put up some cameras. I had been doing a little bit of weed spraying down there last week, and I went down there and there was a ute parked, flat deck white ute parked about where the fence was cut, and I thought that looked a bit sort of odd. But the thing is, people go down there and they fish and swim, but I rode around where the trees are, and sort of had a bit of a look around and nothing poked up, and then I went back to what I was doing on the other side and sprayed there for about half an hour, and then went back to have another look, and the ute was gone. So I must have spooked whoever it was, and they left, but it probably came back. So they possibly were taking them over a period of time as well.
I understand you got a call from the Avocado Association today. What did they say?
They were sort of sorry that it had happened, and just to let us know that we were definitely not alone. It seems to be a problem.
Avocado grower Hamish Jardine and Hawke's Bay Police are urging avocado lovers to be on the lookout for suspicious sellers of the fruit. Firefighters are still battling a big blaze in an industrial area south of Auckland. Fire and Emergency says the fire broke out at a furniture removers and 22 fire trucks are at a warehouse on Inlet Road in Takanini. Nearby businesses were safely evacuated after the fire started about 4:30 this afternoon. Greg Morgan, whose workplace is opposite the fire, spoke to our reporter Katie Scotcher a short time ago.
Yeah, it was really thick black smoke coming from behind there, and the flames are up above that kid building, so they're pretty high. And all the explosions, I think, could be the fiberlight roof. I think they've got a fiberlight type of roof on there. And there was a couple of other louder bangs, but I don't know what they were.
Right, and so they were quite loud explosions, were they?
Yeah, really good.
And can you tell me a little bit about what's in the area? By the looks of things, it's quite an industrial area.
I think it's a packing place or some sort of importing place around the back there, so I think it was a lot of their packing stuff that's gone up.
And that's Greg Morgan talking to our reporter Katie Scotcher. And just a hand, Fire and Emergency say that fire is now contained and controlled. Just to repeat, the fire is now contained and controlled. Lastly, tonight, a happy ending straight out of Homeward Bound. Flint, the conservation dog who spent 36 hours alone, muzzled on a sub-Antarctic island, has been reunited with his owner. The small Jack Russell Fox Terrier cross was preparing to leave Campbell Island a week ago when he was spooked by some sea lions and bolted. What followed was a nervous 36-hour wait and a rescue effort that captured the attention of the international media. Catherine Hutton reports on a homecoming that tugged on the heartstrings like the opening credits of Love Actually.
Whenever I get gloomy with the state of the world, I think about the arrivals gate at Wellington Airport. General opinion is starting to make out that we live in a world of hatred and greed, but I don't see that. It seems to me that love is everywhere. Often it's not particularly dignified or newsworthy, but it's always there. Fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, husbands and wives, man and his dog.
When Richard Johnson ambled through the automatic doors at Wellington Airport this afternoon, he wasn't surprised by the throngs of waiting media. Even aboard the HMNZS Canterbury, he got wind people were talking about his dog Flint. A week ago, Richard and Flint were on Campbell Island, hunting out rats and mice. He says the day started like any other. They had walked into a new harbour that, unbeknown to them, was full of sea lions, who are territorial at this time of year. He says the pair got separated when one launched at him.
Another one come at us from another angle, and so that's what startled him, and we split.
With his dog gone, the search began. But with bad weather closing in and a mechanical issue with the Canterbury, they had to make the heartbreaking decision to leave Flint behind. Aboard the boat, Richard began hounding the crew, who were already making plans to try and find the dog. He says he never gave up hope and told searchers the first place to look was Beeman Cove, where they had based themselves. It's a full 6-hour hike from where he was last seen. Sure enough, when the helicopter crew flew the 6 hours across the Southern Ocean from Dunedin on Friday, they found him sitting on the veranda. Richard was still aboard the boat when the good news came through.
When we're coming back and it got piped over the intercoms, there's just a huge cheer on the boat, and the whole morale of the ship was lifted once the word came in that, because he made quite an impression on the way down. Just, he's got a personality, he's the grumpiest dog there, and he was the smallest one, but he was kind of bossing the rest around on the ship, so everyone kind of took a shine to him.
The story has gone global, reported in the New York Times and the Washington Post. Callista Knock is from Kiwibank, which helps sponsor Doc's conservation program. She says the story holds appeal because everyone loves dogs.
People really understand that dogs are part of the whānau, part of their family, and we know firsthand that there's a really special bond between the handlers and their dogs. They have a really important role to play, but more importantly, they're part of the team. So I think that people really relate and understand to that, and it's good result. We're glad to have him home.
So is Richard and his fiancée Elizabeth McDonald, who says since arriving home on Monday, Flint has been dining on his favourite meal of mince and sleeping on his owner's bed, but missing Richard.
I gave him a bath because he was real dirty. He just was super happy, running all around the house, rolling on the carpet. He's been really happy, but he has been looking out the window a lot, so I think he's wondering where Richard is.
Richard says now he's home, it will be back to work, patrolling the conservation estate around Wellington. Fortunately, in the capital, the only thing he has to contend with are fur seals. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
And if you were just listening to that on the drive home, please go online and check out the story of Flint the Foxy there. He's absolutely gorgeous, doing roly-polies on the floor at Wellington Airport. Super delighted to see his owner. Before we go tonight, just some time for quick feedback here. A lot of you getting in touch about the cannabis. This person saying, not a big fan of pot, but I'd much rather see people growing and smoking their own rather than funding criminal suppliers and gangs. 14 grams, I buy wine by the half dozen. I certainly don't drink them all at once, they say. This one says, just because someone would be able to buy 14 grams a day doesn't mean they would be expected to smoke it all at once, any more than someone buying a bottle of whiskey could drink it all in one day, under normal circumstances, says Sue. Merry Christmas, this person says, New Zealand needs to learn that cannabis is best used by most people as a raw vegetable, as an oil and CBD-rich strains used rather than THC-rich. No doubt these comments will just confuse many listeners, illustrating how much we all have to learn. Smoking cannabis is dirty, wasteful, inefficient, and a very small slice of the real cannabis pie. Someone else says legalise or decriminalise, big difference, but they're not asking that question. Decriminalisation is our family's preferred option. Keep the greedy corporates out of making dollars on a plant. Oh my God, if I had to smoke one a night, 14 grams is fine. I don't want to go back and forth to the shops, they say. Thanks for your feedback. Back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The family of a 15-month-old Samoan boy denied a measles booster by a South Auckland clinic say their son was given antibiotics but not a vaccine because he's not a New Zealand citizen. ProCare's clinical director says the clinic was confused about the rules and has now apologised. Official documents about a New Zealand first-linked forestry company's bid for public money were sent to Shane Jones's office 5 times before the minister declared a conflict of interest. And Auckland Transport is urging people to avoid an industrial area in Takanini where a large fire has been sending thick smoke across the city's south. The fire is now contained. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Others will argue it should be 18 because that's the same age for alcohol and tobacco, but I think 20 is a good kind of Goldilocks point. It's not too low and it's not too high.
Live with local national